So our webinar today is entitled Streamlining Environmental Management in the Public Sector, and facilitating our webinar today will be Jason Fitzpatrick. Jason's the Senior Government Solutions Specialist here at Intelex, and he's got over 11 years experience helping organizations within the public sector to implement environmental management solutions and achieve and maintain ISO 14001 certification. So today, Jason's going to be offering some insight into the business benefits and ROI that stem from implementing an ISO 14001 based environmental management system. And also he's going to be talking about how to gain buy-in and leverage this technology to achieve consistent environmental compliance. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Jason and we can get started.
Great. Thanks so much, JP, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Anyways, to get started, today's presentation is really more of a high-level informational webinar, as JP mentioned, and as opposed to a software or product demo. But of course, we're always happy to get into more specifics with you one-on-one. So definitely feel free to reach out to us, myself, or anyone here at Intelex, and we'd be happy to dive into it a little bit further. All right. So what we're going to cover off today, I'll give you a brief introduction into who we are at Intelex, what we do, and then we'll get into ISO 14001, kind of a high-level overview. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but I wanted to just give that initial background and kind of its growth in the public sector that we've seen. And then we'll take a look at how a centralized, integrated environmental management system can be enabled using technology to really increase those efficiencies and improve the ROI for an EMS. And as JP mentioned as well, we're going to look at what we can do to get that organizational buy-in. We'll look at the key elements that we need to put together that effective proposal. All right, so as I say, a brief introduction into Intelex Technologies. We are a software company, and we develop software for environmental management systems, health and safety management, and quality management. And that has been based on those international standards. So obviously like ISO 14001 for environmental management, but also ISO 9001 for quality, and the OHSAS 18001 standard for safety management. And we've been doing this for about 20 years, since 1992 when the business started. We've got a global client base of over 600 plus customers around the world, and that translates to about 500,000 users that are actually accessing the system. And we've been a profitable, growing company, and as evidenced by some of the awards we've received over the past few years, things like Deloitte Fast 50 and Fast 500. So some of the being one of the fastest 500 growing companies within North America. So an achievement we're quite proud to display there. But let's get into it. So as I mentioned, assuming that everyone might have an understanding, at least somewhat, at some level of ISO 14001, but I wanted to give a quick overview. And ISO 14001 essentially is that internationally recognized standard for environmental management system. It was developed around 1996 and essentially allows an organization to analyze, control, reduce their environmental impact of their activities and services. And this was a standard that's published by the International Organization for Standardization. And what it doesn't do is it doesn't outline specific standards or performance levels. But what it does do is outline those generic requirements for the management system. So it establishes that framework to comply with the relevant environmental legislation and regulations. And the reason why it doesn't outline the performance levels is that's something that would really vary from sector to sector and business to business. And just as of note here, you can see as of the survey that was completed in 2010, the number of worldwide registrations for ISO 14000 was just about 225,000, and that's been growing at a pace of about 30%, I believe, over the last little while, so it's probably quite a bit higher at this point as well. But that was the latest number that I was able to pull up through the ISO site. Now, ISO 14001, very similar to ISO 9001, 18001, is based on that continuous improvement plan, do, check, act model. So in terms of an environmental management system, the plan component essentially is identifying an organization's environmental aspects and impacts related to their services that they provide, or in the case of other sectors, manufacturers, the products that they produce as well. The do is actually implementing those environmental policies, the goals and the programs to protect the environment and conserve resources in there. You have the check component, which is to consistently monitor the system and make the adjustments when necessary, and act is that continually improving the system. So setting new goals, implementing new programs to better the environmental performance of that particular organization. Now, as we've seen, the public sector has really been one of the fastest growing sectors for ISO 14001 implementation. We're actually seeing that at all levels, both local, regional level, and the national, federal levels. And we at Intelex, actually, we have a number of clients from the public sector, and as JP mentioned earlier, I've worked specifically with that sector for quite a while. And you can see these are just some examples of our existing clients, and they come from a wide range of municipal level, but also the state, provincial level, and federal government departments and agencies. And just some highlights I'd like to point out. There's a strong push, probably in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, I'd say, where a number of municipalities within Arizona were setting up environmental management systems. So there's a strong push there, and we have such cities as Tempe, Phoenix, City of Surprise, Scottsdale, Arizona, that are all using our system and have environmental management systems in place. So, what's driving that growth within that particular sector? Why are governments choosing to implement environmental management systems? And there's actually a number of benefits to registration of ISO 14001. One being money, operational cost savings. So improving environmental performance and compliance, and also things like reduction in fines or incidents. That can be a big cost savings there. Another factor might be to act as a leader or a mentor to local industries. And then there's also, of course, improved public perception. So, certification can be a powerful marketing tool to the public, to industry that you deal with, to regulators. It shows that you're committed to sustainable development and you've got a sound environmental policy. And we're also seeing public expectations and awareness really increase around the government's ability to manage growth and infrastructure expansion in an environmentally sound way. And another reason that a couple other thoughts on that note too is it also allows governments and businesses to speak the same language. And that's very important. The idea being that companies will enjoy a greater understanding and support for their environmental activities from those government authorities that are on that same playing field. So basically, an EMS can be kind of an intimidating and big beast to tackle when we're first setting it up. And as I mentioned at the beginning, all of those various elements that you have to manage, things like environmental aspects and impacts, controlling all of our documents, training, audits, and so on. So it covers a lot of areas, a lot of elements, and thus there's a lot of the associated cost with those areas. So how can that be streamlined?